Guys, before we finish the next chapter, I wanted to look at Peak Worksheet 8, the next Peak Worksheet I want you guys to work on. This one, your favorite bit of vocabulary. No, but not so bad. There's only 5 words, 1 page. Okay, nothing crazy. Words we've been looking at. So, yeah, 5 words. Try to give synonym, antonym, and draw a little picture. That's it. Do your best. Look up stuff if you need to, no problem there. And any questions, ask on Teams. And then something a little more fun, personification. So we've looked at, I think, simile, we've looked at metaphor, even a bit of imagery when we're talking about descriptive writing. Today, this week, we're going to look at a bit of personification. Personification is even in the word, person, okay? Personification. What that means, it's when they give human characteristics to something that's not a human. Let me give you an example. The flame of the candle danced in the dark. Can a flame or a fire dance? No. People dance. Fire is not human. So when you're giving things that are like not human, human characteristics, then that's personification. Okay? There's lots of examples out there of personification. I think there are some from the book. And Pete said, "You can never tell who the mountain will allow and who will not." That's personification. So it's making the mountain, um, it's saying that the mountain allows or doesn't allows people, as if the mountain makes decisions. And it doesn't. People make decisions. So that's personification. They had positioned the camera in front of the rotting slope, and it was up all night listening, and I was up all night listening to the slope belch boulders. So the slope doesn't belch, right? Burp. So a mountain doesn't burp, but Peak is saying that it burps, and it makes it more playful. It's a more playful way to describe things. It gives more character and personality to your story. Okay? So I want you guys to brainstorm a poem. You guys are gonna write me a little poem. So, like, what type of poem do you want to make? Do you want to make a funny one, a serious one? Because it's got like it's getting serious in the last couple chapters, but there's lots you can work with. Think of some similes, compare two things. Think of metaphors, some imagery, like your 5 senses, what you see, smell, hear, and hyperbole. It's an extreme exaggeration. Something like, I'm so hungry I could eat a horse. Okay? Or he's as loud as an elephant. Really extreme exaggeration. That is fun. Then I want you to write a poem. So title your poem by who, and it's going to say, I am Everest. I see, I want, I know, I am, I feel. And make a poem like this. It's going to look like a mountain. Nice little poem. Piece of cake. Any questions? Ask away. And post your poems to Teams, guys. I love to see them. Your classmates love to see them. Do it. All right, we're going to finish our next chapter in Peak. We are on page 210, which is wild. We've got maybe 40 pages left. So they're on their shortcut to ABC, and they got this big ice wall to climb. By the time Zopa kicked Sunjo and me out of our sleeping bags, Yogi and Yash were already 50 feet up the wall, setting ice screws so we'd have something to hook onto. The sun was barely up. They had to have started this. They had to have started when it was still dark. We ate quickly, packed, then strapped on our crampons and harnesses. Zopa said he was staying below to tie the packs and would climb last. A bitter wind blasted the wall head on, which was good because it pushed us into it. If the wind had been coming from an angle, it would have blown us right off the wall. Ice axe in each hand, dig crampon in. Bury axe. Ice splinters in your face. Pull. Dig other crampon in. Bury axe. About 65 feet up, I clipped into an ice anchor and took a breath. Yogi and Yash had already reached the top, dropped ropes, and hauled up all the gear. Zopa had just started up the wall. Sunjo was clawing his way up 20 feet below me. He seemed to be struggling. which wasn't too surprising considering he'd been sick for the last few days, cooped up in a porter's tent. I waited until he looked up and gave him a wave. He returned it with a grim nod. I started again, and had gotten up about 3 steps when I heard the yell. It took me a second to get myself anchored so I could look down. What I saw wasn't pretty. Sun Joe had slipped down about 10 feet and was hanging on the edge of a protrusion by one axe. I'd seen the protrusion on the way up and knew it was too far off the wall for him to get his crampon planted in the ice. "I'm coming!" Zopa shouted at him, but it would take him at least 45 minutes to reach him. Sun Joe wouldn't be able to hold on for more than a few minutes. I was a lot closer, but the only thing harder and slower than climbing up an ice wall is climbing down an ice wall. I looked up, hoping to see Yogi or Yash, but there was no sign of them. They must have already forged ahead to set up the next camp. I didn't even have time to think about what I was going to do next, which was just as well. I started scrambling sideways across the wall towards the gear rope, 30 feet away. Zopa continued to shout encouragement to Sun Joe. He was climbing the wall as fast as he could, but he had to know that no matter how fast he went, it wouldn't be fast enough to save his grandson. When I finally reached the rope, I gave it a tug. It seemed solid enough, but I didn't know if it would hold my weight. The brothers might not have anchored it properly because they were just hauling gear up with it. "I'm slipping," Sun Joe said desperately. "I'll be there in a minute," I shouted. "Hang on, Sun Joe," Zopa shouted, catching on to what I was trying to do. "Don't give up." I wanted to test the rope more, but there was no time. I hooked on to it and gave it all my weight. It stretched a little, but held. I swallowed my heart and crabbed my way back towards Sun Joe. When I got directly above him, I quickly hooked the rope to an ice screw I knew was secure and rappelled to him, hoping the rope hooked to his harness, getting the rope hooked to his harness just as his axe slipped from the ice. "Got him!" I shouted to Zopa, then looked at Sun Joe. "You okay?" He nodded. He was crying. So was I. Apparently, I had forgiven him. It took us another hour to get to the top. Zopa got there about 10 minutes after us, looking concerned and relieved. "Nothing broken?" he asked. Sun Joe shook his head. "What happened?" "My axe broke." Zopa nodded, then looked at me. "Thank you." "You can thank Yogi and Yash for securing that rope," I said. "First thing I did when we got to the top was check it. The rope was tied to a carbiner attached to a 3-inch ice bolt that wasn't going anywhere. Sun Joe and I could have played Tarzan on the rope all day long." "But you didn't know that," Zopa said. "Yeah, well," I said, a little embarrassed, "Yogi and Yash know what they're doing." "Not always," Zopa said. "One of the axes Sun Joe was using today was the same one they were throwing at the wall yesterday afternoon." Uh-oh. I suspected they were going to hear about that when they caught up to them, and I was right. When we got to camp, Zopa took Yogi and Yash to the other side and spoke to them for a good 10 minutes. He never raised his voice, but when they came back, they looked like he had whipped them. "2 truckloads of Chinese soldiers got here today," Josh said, talking to a different expedition leader who had just arrived at ABC, along with 6 military climbers. "Place looks like an army encampment." "Glad I'm up here," the leader said. "Well, you're not off the hook. From what I hear, they're heading up the mountain tomorrow morning to check everybody's papers. If you don't have a passport, visa, and permit, they're going to boot you off the mountain." "We have them. What's his problem?" "When the truck that Zopa and my son left on yesterday got to the second checkpoint, Zopa and my son weren't on it. The driver claimed they got on a second truck and went another way." "I hope your son's okay." "No worries. Zopa wouldn't let anything happen to him. I'm sure they're well on their way to Nepal by now. I thought I'd just give you a heads up about what's going on down here." "Thanks," the other leader said. "What about the Chinese climbers? Are they any good?" "They're gung-ho and well equipped. They pulled them off a high altitude climb, but I'm not sure where they were. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried for the summit while we're up there. I know I would. I hear you. It's gonna get crowded at the top. Zopa and the brothers spread a map out and started talking in Nepalese. What's going on? Zopa says, we can't stay in any of the camps until we reach Camp 5, Sundro explained. They're picking alternative sites. I looked at the map. We were just about parallel to Camp 2, but 7 or 8 miles to the north. It would take us at least another day to pull up even with ABC. We could be up on the summit in less than a week. Wow, they're getting there. All right, guys, I'm going to stop us here. Hope you're having a great week. I'll be actually in school next week, so you might get a video from me in the school. Hope you're having a great week. Bye, guys.